Hola, vamos a aprender sobre lección 1, verbos reflexivos. So our first main new concept for Spanish 2 is going to be reflexive verbs. And a few basics about them. They're used to indicate that the subject does something to or for himself or herself. And these will be used when the subject is also the receiver of the action, often kind of the direct object, the idea there. So it reflects the action of the verb back to the subject. That's one way that people like to think about these. Reflexive verbs reflect the action of the verb back to the subject. Now, reflexive verbs in their infinitive form will have a se attached to the end of the infinitive to identify them. It won't affect how we conjugate them. It's just kind of an identification thing. So lavarse, dormirse, llamarse, and so on. All of those have this little se attached at the end. Some people like to think that that is like a reflexive pronoun itself, and then it gets moved around when it gets conjugated. But really, it's just there to identify it as a reflexive verb. So these reflexive verbs always will use reflexive pronouns. And that's why some people like to think of the infinitive there as the reflexive pronoun that you'll have to take and move around, which that works well for some people conceptualizing this. So here are the reflexive pronouns. We have me, te, se, nos, os, se. And this is very similar to our direct object and our indirect object pronouns charts. Here you have the whole bottom half of the chart is going to be se, which is perhaps going to cause some ambiguity, although these will clear themselves up pretty well based off the subject, which we'll see here in a little bit. We'll have a quiz on this this week as well, so you'll want to get to know that chart. All right, a few more details. So this concept is one that is definitely something we don't really have in English. So a lot of concepts that we deal with, there's kind of a reciprocal English equivalent. This one, however, is pretty much its own thing. So when a reflexive verb is conjugated, the reflexive pronoun will be changed to match the subject. So for example, you would have I sit, which is sentarse. You would conjugate sentarse, so sentarse is an E to IE verb. You'll conjugate it like you would a regular verb. So you just kind of ignore that se at the end. So you have sentar, conjugate that to match your subject, which you get siento. And then you take and put the reflexive pronoun in that matches with the subject. So this one, you could have yo me siento. Often you drop that subject pronoun of yo, so you have me siento, or te sientas. Or another couple of examples with cepillarse. You have me cepillo, or yo me cepillo. Cepillarse, you ignore the little se at the end, cepillar, conjugate it to match your subject, in this case, yo. So, yo me cepillo los dientes, I brush my teeth, or ella se cepilla los dientes. There you have the se as your reflexive pronoun matched with ella. And then you have cepilla there matched also with our subject and conjugated with our subject ella. And one thing you'll notice here, the se can be a little bit ambiguous, although the subject will clarify it up. So you don't have to do any like prepositional pronouns or anything like that. Now, reflexive pronouns follow the same rules for placement as direct object pronouns and indirect object pronouns. So, for example, with the verb vestirse, you could have in a infinitive construction sentence, you could have ellos se van a vestir, or ellos van a vestirse. They are going to get dressed. Now, the thing to realize here is the best equivalent we have in English would be this idea of themselves or herself. So they are going to get themselves dressed, would be kind of our, sometimes sounds okay in their reflexive equivalent, but usually in English we leave it out. But that is the idea. The action is coming back upon the person who is our subject. One thing that's worth keeping in mind here, when it is attached to the infinitive, it can be tempting to just always use the se at the end because that is the infinitive ending that we have like in our vocab and stuff. But that always has to match with your subject. So if this was I get myself, or I am going to get dressed, you'd have yo van a vestirme, with the me there attached, matching with your subject pronoun yo. Or here would be another example, nos estamos maquillando or estamos maquillándonos, and that would be attaching it to a present participle, and you'll see there you can do it. You have to add that accent there on the A or the E and iendo if you do that, but it is totally allowed. Also, like normal, you have really three things you can do. In any sentence, it can go in front of the conjugated verb. And if all you have is a single conjugated verb, that is your only option. You can attach to that infinitive in an infinitive construction sentence, and you can attach to a present participle in a present progressive sentence. Now, one thing to take note of is some verbs in Spanish can be reflexive or non-reflexive depending on the situation. Remember, reflexive verbs, it's this idea of an action coming back upon the subject. So Patricia washes the socks would be non-reflexive because the action is going out to the socks. It's not coming back to Patricia. So here, lavar would not be lavarse. Lavarse would be the reflexive. Here you just use the verb lavar. Patricia lava los calcetines. However, if it was something like this, Patricia washes her face, that would be reflexive because it's really coming back on herself. She's washing her own face. So Patricia se lava la cara. Now, maybe you've noticed I've not been using possessive adjectives. So body parts or clothing generally are not referred to with possessive adjectives, but with the definite article when using reflexive verbs. They kind of see it as kind of kind of obvious that it would have the possessive adjective, because if you're not doing it to yourself or to his self or herself, it's not going to be reflexive. So the fact that it's reflexive will tell you who the owner would be of those things. So ustedes se cepillan el pelo, you all brush your hair. If that was you all brush my hair, it would no longer be reflexive, at which point then you would use the possessive adjective. You'd say ustedes cepillan mi pelo or something like that. Here would be another example. La niña necesita quitarse los zapatos. The girl needs to take off her shoes or the shoes. Either would be a fine translation. All right, so now we're going to try this a little bit. So I'm going to give you a sentence. Probably be worth pausing. Once I give you the sentence, translate it, see how you do. So first, we have despertarse, an E to IE verb, which equals to wake up. I want you to translate or put into this sentence the reflexive verb with its reflexive pronoun that would fit into that sentence. You should have se despierta. So se there is going to be the reflexive pronoun that matches with mis hermanos, and despiertan is going to be the conjugation that also matches then with that subject. The only place that reflexive pronoun can go is before that conjugated verb. Número dos. Tu blank tarde. Fill in the blank. Should have te despiertas. Number three. Fill in the blank again with despertarse. Nosotros blank tarde. Should have nos despertamos. So nos again matching with nosotros, despertamos, no subject, no stem change there with nosotros. Número cuatro, Benito blank tarde. Should have se despierta. Número cinco, yo blank tarde. Should have me despierto. So yo me despierto tarde. Then we're going to try another verb. We've got ponerse, which means to put on. Número uno, él blank una chaqueta. You should have se pone. So se matches with él, and pone is conjugated to match él. Número dos, yo blank una chaqueta. You should have me pongo. So yo me pongo una chaqueta. Número 3, usted blank una chaqueta. Should have, se pone. Número 4, nosotras blank una chaqueta. You should have, nos ponemos, o nosotras nos ponemos una chaqueta. Y finalmente, las niñas blank una chaqueta se ponen. El fin.